in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, nestled between ancient trees and winding trails, there lay a village forgotten by time. Locals spoke in hushed whispers about the mysterious hamlet, its existence known only to a select few who dared to venture into the depths of the dense forest. Rumors of an otherworldly presence and unsettling occurrences clung to the village like a shroud, but no one could pinpoint its exact location. Intrigued by the tales that had passed through generations, I embarked on a journey to unravel the mysteries of the vanishing village. Armed with little more than a backpack and a sense of trepidation, I delved into the heart of the dense forest. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, and the shadows of the towering trees seemed to whisper secrets that eluded my understanding. As I ventured deeper into the woods, the ambient sounds of nature faded into an oppressive silence. The only company I had was the rhythmic crunch of leaves beneath my boots and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures in the underbrush. A thick fog clung to the air, shrouding the forest in an eerie stillness. Hours passed, and just as doubt began to creep into my mind, I stumbled upon a clearing bathed in an otherworldly light. In the center stood the village, a collection of weathered cottages and cobblestone paths that seemed to materialize out of the mist. It was as if the village had been plucked from the pages of a forgotten fairy tale, frozen in time and untouched by the passage of centuries. The air in the village carried a sense of sadness, and the creaking of the old windmill added to the haunting ambience. The cobblestone streets were empty, and the windows of the cottages stared back at me like vacant eyes. It was a place lost to time, a relic of a bygone era. As I explored the village, a disconcerting feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of the wind. It was as if the village itself held its breath, waiting for something that lingered just beyond the edge of perception. The cottages, though seemingly abandoned, bore signs of recent activity. Tables were set for meals, and clothes hung on washing lines as if the inhabitants had vanished mid-task. Unease gripped me as I realized the village was not abandoned but suspended in a perpetual state of anticipation. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch with a life of their own. In the light, I noticed a figure in the distance, a silhouette that stood motionless at the edge of the village square. As I approached, the figure revealed itself to be an elderly man, his eyes glazed with a haunted gaze. He spoke in hushed tones, revealing the tale of the village's curse. Generations ago, the villagers had made a pact with an ancient entity, trading their mortality for prosperity. In return, the entity demanded a sacrifice, a soul to be claimed each year as the price for the village's continued existence. The man's voice trembled as he explained how the village had become trapped in a nightmarish loop, forever reliving the same events leading up to the annual sacrifice. Each year, a chosen villager would vanish without a trace, and the rest would continue their lives as if nothing had happened. The memories of the taken were erased, and the village would reset, ready to repeat the cycle once more. As he spoke, the air grew colder, and the shadows around us seemed to writhe with an unnatural energy. The man urged me to leave to escape the clutches of the village before the cycle reset once more. But a morbid curiosity held me in place, as if an unseen force compelled me to witness the unfolding tragedy. The night wore on, and a sense of impending dread hung in the air. The villagers moved through the motions of their lives, oblivious to the looming darkness that threatened to consume them. As the hour approached midnight, the atmosphere in the village became increasingly tense, a palpable energy that crackled with darkness. In the village square, a group of villagers assembled in somber silence. They moved with a resigned determination, their faces etched with a sorrow that transcended the passage of time. At the center of the gathering stood a hooded figure, the harbinger of the annual sacrifice. As the clock struck midnight, a haunting melody echoed through the village, emanating from an unseen source. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the spectral tune, as if the very fabric of reality resonated with the impending ritual. The hooded figure stepped forward, and the villagers parted to reveal a trapdoor hidden beneath the cobblestones. With a heavy heart, I watched as the trapdoor opened, revealing a yawning abyss below. The hooded figure descended into the darkness, disappearing from sight. The villagers, their expressions vacant, closed the trapdoor and returned to their daily lives, the memory of the sacrifice erased from their minds. A chilling realization gripped me. The sacrifice was not just a physical disappearance, but a metaphysical erasure of existence. The soul of the sacrificed villager was not only taken from the village, but erased from the collective memory of those who remained. As the night wore on, the cycle of the village's curse reset once more. The hooded figure reappeared in the square. The trapdoor opened, and the villagers, oblivious to the horror unfolding before them, repeated the same tragic dance. It was a nightmare caught in an infinite loop, a purgatory from which there seemed to be no escape. As I attempted to leave the village, the very landscape seemed to warp and contort, redirecting me back into the heart of the cursed hamlet. No matter how far I walked, the village persisted, an inescapable labyrinth of sorrow and despair. The hooded figure, now gazing at me with empty eyes, beckoned me toward the trapdoor. The haunting melody swelled, and the shadows closed in around me. I felt an unseen force pulling me toward the abyss, the air filled with the anguished whispers of the forgotten. In that horrifying moment, I understood the true nature of the village's curse. I was destined to become the next sacrifice, my very existence to be erased from the fabric of reality. The hooded figure approached, and as its cold touch enveloped me, the village and its cursed inhabitants faded into darkness. Story 2. In the small town of Ravenswood, nestled between the dense woods and rolling hills, there existed a dilapidated mansion that bore the weight of a dark history. Locals spoke of the house in hushed tones, avoiding the overgrown path that led to its imposing entrance. Rumors of a sinister presence, of spectral apparitions that wandered its desolate halls, kept even the bravest townsfolk at bay. I, however, was not one to succumb to local superstitions. Fueled by a journalist's curiosity and a thirst for unraveling the unknown, I decided to venture into the heart of Ravenswood and investigate the haunted mansion. The air was thick with an unspoken tension as I approached the creaking iron gates that guarded the path to the foreboding structure. The mansion loomed in the distance, its facade obscured by the twisted branches of gnarled trees. The overcast sky cast a pallor over the desolate landscape, intensifying the eerie atmosphere that clung to the air. As I approached the entrance, the wind whispered through the decaying leaves, as if warning me of the darkness that awaited within. The mansion's doors groaned in protest as I pushed them open, revealing a grand foyer that had long lost its former splendor. Dust-covered furniture lay shrouded in white sheets, and the air carried the musty scent of neglect. A cold draft swept through the corridor, carrying with it a mournful sigh that seemed to echo through the empty halls. My footsteps echoed as I explored the mansion's labyrinthine corridors. Each room bore the scars of time, with faded wallpaper peeling away to reveal the decaying walls beneath. Portraits of somber-faced individuals stared down at me from their gilded frames, their eyes seeming to follow my every move. It was as if the very walls themselves held memories that refused to fade. As I delved deeper into the mansion, a subtle unease settled in the pit of my stomach. Shadows danced on the walls, shifting and contorting as if animated by unseen forces. The temperature dropped, and an otherworldly hush enveloped the air, creating an almost tangible sense of foreboding. In the dark light, I stumbled upon a door at the end of a long corridor, seemingly untouched by time. The wood, though aged, retained a certain luster that set it apart from the rest of the mansion's disrepair. The handle felt cool to the touch as I turned it, revealing a room bathed in an ethereal glow. The room was adorned with ancient tapestries and archaic symbols etched into the walls. A single flickering candle illuminated a peculiar object at the center, a mirror that seemed to emanate an otherworldly aura. The reflection in the mirror, however, was not my own. As I gazed into the reflective surface, the room seemed to warp and contort. The air thickened with an unseen energy and the temperature plummeted. The mirror revealed not the grandeur of the room, but a desolate expanse, a realm of shadows and twisted reality. It was as if the mirror was a portal to another dimension, a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin. A figure materialized in the distorted reflection, a specter with hollow eyes that bore into mine. Its gaunt features twisted in anguish, and an ethereal wail filled the room. The very fabric of reality seemed to unravel as the figure reached out from the mirror, its ghostly fingers stretching toward me. I stumbled back in terror, but an invisible force held me in place. The room pulsated with an otherworldly energy as the specter emerged from the mirror, its form transitioning from the spectral realm into the corporeal world. The air crackled with an unholy force, and the temperature dropped to an icy chill. The specter, now free from the confines of the mirror, moved with a haunting grace. Its movements were deliberate, as if driven by a dark intent. The room seemed to darken in its presence, the shadows coalescing around the figure like loyal minions. I tried to flee, my footsteps echoing through the desolate mansion, but the specter pursued with an inexorable determination. The air itself seemed to resist my escape, as if the very mansion conspired with the spectral entity to keep me captive within its walls. As I reached the grand foyer, the mansion itself seemed to shift. The walls groaned and the shadows reached out with ghostly fingers. The specter closed in, its hollow gaze fixed upon me. I could feel its icy breath on the back of my neck, and a whispered lamentation echoed in the air. In a final act of desperation, I burst through the mansion doors and stumbled into the moonlit night. The air outside was thick with an oppressive energy, and the wind carried with it the mournful wails of the specter that lingered within. The mansion loomed behind me, its windows glowing with an otherworldly light, as if the very soul of the structure had been tainted by the sinister force that now walked its desolate halls. I fled through the twisted path, the forest seemingly alive with spectral echoes. The very trees whispered in tandem with the haunting footsteps that pursued me. The specter, now a looming presence at the edge of my vision, cast a shadow that stretched far beyond its physical form. In a final moment of dread, I realized that escape was impossible. The specter overtook me with a spectral embrace, its form merging with mine. Darkness enveloped my senses, and a chorus of anguished whispers filled my mind. I became one with the specter, a prisoner in the mansion's eternal grasp. The night air echoed with the mournful wails of the haunted entity, now free to roam the desolate corridors with a new, unwilling companion. The mansion, now cloaked in an otherworldly glow, seemed to revel in its newfound darkness. The wind carried with it the sorrowful echoes of the trapped souls that lingered within, and the very air vibrated with a spectral lamentation. In that moment of horrific union, I became a part of the haunted history of Ravenswood Mansion, a tale whispered in the shadows, a spectral presence forever bound to the dark force that dwelled within its walls. Story 3. In the heart of the mist-shrouded town of Eldridge, where the streets seemed to coil and twist like the whispers of the wind, there stood an imposing mansion known as Blackthorn Manor. The locals spoke in hushed tones about its dark history, tales of an evil force that had gripped the mansion for generations. Intrigued by the rumors, I decided to delve into the enigma that was Blackthorn Manor and uncover the secrets it harbored. The mansion, veiled in a perpetual gloom, loomed at the edge of Eldridge like a sentinel of shadows. As I approached, the air grew heavy, and an unsettling feeling gripped me. The wrought iron gates groaned as I pushed them open, revealing a path overgrown with gnarled vines that seemed to writhe in silent agony. The entrance hall echoed with the creaking of the floorboards as I stepped into the oppressive darkness within Blackthorn Manor. Dust-laden furniture draped in white sheets loomed like ghostly sentinels. The air carried the musty scent of abandonment, and the silence was broken only by the distant murmur of the wind. As I traversed the mansion's labyrinthine corridors, the walls seemed to close in on me, their faded wallpaper peeling away to reveal the decaying structure beneath. Portraits of solemn-faced ancestors adorned the walls, their eyes following my every move with an eerie intensity. It was as if the very essence of the mansion observed my presence, judging me with a silent ill will. The deeper I ventured, the more the oppressive atmosphere intensified. The air itself seemed to thicken, laden with an unseen weight that pressed down on my shoulders. Whispers, indistinct and haunting, echoed through the halls, as if the very walls held secrets that refused to be forgotten. A grand staircase, its steps worn by the passage of time, beckoned me to the upper floors. The light cast long, twisted shadows that danced along the walls like specters in a macabre ballet. The silence was punctuated only by the distant howling of the wind, a mournful symphony that seemed to echo the mansion's desolation. In one of the rooms, I discovered an old study adorned with dusty, leather-bound books and tattered maps. The fireplace, though long extinguished, emanated a residual warmth that hinted at a bygone era. As I perused the books, A sense of dread settled in the pit of my stomach, as if the very knowledge within the room held a forceful power. The study, it seemed, belonged to a former owner of Blackthorn Manor, a scholar who had delved into forbidden realms of the occult. The pages spoke of eldritch rituals and dark pacts made in the shadows. The scholar's descent into madness, fueled by his insatiable quest for forbidden knowledge, was etched in the ink of the cursed tomes. Driven by an inexplicable compulsion, I continued my exploration, guided by the indistinct whispers that seemed to beckon me to the mansion's darkest corners. The walls seemed to absorb the very essence of my presence, and the air became charged with a palpable evil. In the heart of the mansion, I stumbled upon a forgotten ballroom, a vast expanse of faded opulence, its chandeliers hanging like grotesque ornaments. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, and the room seemed to pulse with a spectral energy. As I stepped further into the ballroom, the shadows seemed to come alive, coalescing into amorphous shapes that writhed and contorted. A ghastly apparition materialized at the center of the ballroom, a figure cloaked in tattered finery, its face obscured by the shadows. The specter moved with an ethereal grace, its movements echoing the remnants of a dance from a bygone era. The very air seemed to vibrate with the spectral waltz, a haunting melody that echoed through the chamber. The specter, its hollow gaze fixed upon me, beckoned me to join the spectral dance. The room itself seemed to pulsate with a dark energy, the walls closing in around me. A cold sweat broke out on my brow as an unseen force compelled me to become a part of the macabre ballet. As I danced with the spectral figure, the shadows enveloped us in an otherworldly embrace. The air became charged with a hateful force, and the very fabric of reality seemed to warp. The haunting melody reached a crescendo, and the room itself dissolved into an abyss of darkness. In that moment of disorienting blackness, I felt a searing pain, a wrenching sensation that tore at the very core of my being. The spectral dance had become a nightmarish descent into a void of suffering. The air echoed with the anguished cries of forgotten souls, and the shadows became a suffocating shroud that enveloped me in an eternal torment. The room, now a realm of perpetual darkness, resonated with the tormented whispers of the mansion's hostile history. The spectral figure, its features contorted in an eternal scream, loomed in the shadows, a harbinger of the horrors that lurked within Blackthorn Manor. And then, in a horrific revelation, the darkness consumed me entirely. I became one with the shadows, a tortured soul bound to the sinister force that gripped Blackthorn Manor. The echoes of my own screams joined the chorus of the forgotten, lost in the eternal abyss that lurked within the mansion's desolate halls. Story 4. On the rugged cliffs of Raven's Point, overlooking the tempestuous sea, stood an ancient lighthouse that bore the scars of time. Locals whispered of its haunted history, a tale of lost souls and a beacon that called out across the abyss. Intrigued by the eerie rumors, I embarked on a journey to unravel the mysteries that shrouded the desolate structure. As I approached Raven's Point, the wind carried with it the mournful cries of seagulls and the distant roar of crashing waves. The lighthouse loomed on the cliff's edge, its weather-beaten exterior bearing witness to decades of maritime tumult. A lone beam of light swept across the darkening horizon, a spectral sentinel that seemed to beckon those daring enough to uncover the secrets within. The entrance creaked open with a foreboding groan as I stepped into the lighthouse. The air was thick with the scent of salt and decay, and the walls echoed with the sound of my footsteps on the spiraling staircase that ascended to the beacon above. Flickering candlelight cast distorted shadows on the walls, and the haunting melody of the wind seeped through the cracks in the structure. As I climbed higher, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. The air itself seemed to thicken, and the temperature dropped as if the lighthouse retained the cold touch of the souls it had witnessed. The steps beneath my feet felt worn and hollow, echoing the weight of forgotten footsteps that had ascended the staircase before. Upon reaching the beacon room, I discovered a vast, circular chamber with panoramic windows that offered a view of the tumultuous sea below. The beam of light swept across the darkness, cutting through the night like a spectral blade. An old ship's wheel stood at the center, an artifact of a bygone era when the lighthouse was manned by keepers who braved the elements to guide sailors to safety. The room bore the scars of abandonment, with dusty charts and faded nautical instruments scattered about. The wind whistled through the cracks in the windows, producing an eerie, melodic hum that seemed to echo the lighthouse's lament. It was as if the very structure mourned the absence of the keepers who had once tended to its beacon. As I examined the artifacts, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the candles, plunging the room into darkness. The beam of light outside continued its ceaseless rotation, casting intermittent flashes that revealed glimpses of a figure standing at the far end of the room, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to materialize from the abyss. A chill ran down my spine as the figure approached, its movements deliberate yet ethereal. The air crackled with an unseen energy, and the temperature plummeted. The room became a battleground between light and shadow, and the wind carried with it a mournful whisper that seemed to emanate from the very walls. The figure, now discernible in the intermittent flashes of light, bore the attire of a lighthouse keeper from a bygone era, a tattered uniform and a weathered hat that obscured its features. Hollow eyes stared into the abyss, and a ghostly hand reached out, beckoning me to follow. Driven by a morbid curiosity, I stepped into the darkness with the figure as my guide. The beam of light outside cast a fractured illumination on the spiral staircase, revealing glimpses of spectral apparitions that lingered in the shadows. It was as if the lighthouse itself had become a realm between worlds, a purgatory for lost souls bound by a maritime tragedy. Descending deeper into the lighthouse, the whispers of the sea grew louder, weaving a haunting symphony with the echoes of bygone footsteps and the lament of the wind. The air vibrated with a spectral resonance, and the boundary between the living and the dead blurred into a disorienting dance of shadows. In the bowels of the lighthouse, I discovered a forgotten chamber, the keeper's quarters adorned with faded photographs and maritime memorabilia. The figure, now a melancholic specter, stood beside a decaying cot, its gaze fixed upon an old journal that lay open on a weathered desk. As I approached, the journal revealed the tragic tale of the lighthouse keeper, a man named Elias Grayson who had tended to Ravens Point for decades. The entries chronicled the keeper's descent into madness, his isolation, and his obsession with a ghostly siren song that echoed across the sea. Elias's words spoke of an otherworldly allure that had ensnared him, a haunting melody that seemed to emanate from the depths of the ocean. The spectral figure beside me reached out, and as its ghostly fingers traced the words in the journal, the very air seemed to vibrate with the lament of the lighthouse keeper. In a moment of revelation, the figure turned toward me, its hollow eyes filled with an eternal sorrow. It spoke, its voice a whisper on the wind, revealing the tragic fate of Elias Grayson, a man consumed by the haunting song of a siren that lured him to the treacherous cliffs below. As the spectral figure recounted Elias's demise, the chamber itself seemed to morph into a spectral tableau. The wind howled with a mournful intensity, and the very walls bore witness to the lighthouse keeper's tragic descent into the abyss. The air thickened with an otherworldly energy, and the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred into a disorienting dance of shadows. In a final, harrowing revelation, the figure gestured toward the panoramic window. The beam of light outside cast a fractured illumination on the churning sea below, revealing ghostly apparitions that ascended from the depths, a legion of lost souls trapped in the siren song, forever bound to the lighthouse's lament. And then, with a spectral wail that echoed through the abyss, the figure and the ghostly apparitions vanished into the shadows. The room itself seemed to exhale, the air heavy with the weight of a maritime tragedy that refused to be forgotten. As I stood alone in the now silent chamber, the wind carried with it the mournful cries of the lost souls that lingered within the lighthouse's haunted embrace. The beam of light outside continued its ceaseless rotation, casting an ephemeral glow on the desolate sea below, a sea that held the secrets of a spectral song that would forever haunt Ravens Point.